Hello people, good night. Welcome everyone to our news channel. Here you are always well informed. Leave your like and thank you very much. Nebraska is among 12 states whose population is at least 20% people of color, yet whose highest state court is devoid of any racial or ethnic representation. That's according to the latest analysis of state Supreme Court diversity by the Brennan Center for Justice, which reports that, overall, high state court benches across the country fail to reflect the racial, ethnic and gender diversity of the communities they serve. Amanda Powers, a researcher at the independent, nonpartisan law and policy organization, said the findings should be concerning. Diversity on state Supreme Courts leads to higher public confidence in the court system, Powers said. Having people feel represented on these benches and among judges making decisions about their rights and the interpretation of their state's laws is very important. The report is a follow-up to a more extensive baseline Brennan Center study published in 2019, which showed Nebraska as performing low in diversity. At that time, Nebraska was one of 13 states that had not seated a person of color since at least 1960, the earliest year for which comprehensive data was available. In the latest report, which tracked data through mid-May, researchers noted a slight increase nationally in the past year in demographic and professional diversity across state Supreme Courts. During that time, the percentage of people of color on state high court benches increased by 1 percentage point, to 19%, and the share of women also increased by 1 percentage point, to 42%. Supreme appointments. In Nebraska, the governor appoints new Supreme Court judges from a list of qualified nominees provided by a judicial nominating commission. Justices run for retention during the first general election. Voters check yes or no, that comes up after they've been on the court for 3 years. Subsequent terms last 6 years. Source: Nebraska Judicial Branch. Some states in the past year reached so-called milestones for diversity, the report said. Meanwhile, in Nebraska, where the governor appoints judges, the composition of the state's highest court remained unchanged. Among examples of diversity gains cited in the report was the Illinois Supreme Court, which for the first time in its history now has a majority of female justices. Of the 7 judges, 3 are black. And Nevada, which swore in its first person of color to the state high court, now has a woman who is both its first black and Asian American justice. Nebraska's composition remains an all-white body of 2 women and 5 men. The High Court in Nebraska does outpace at least 7 other states in female representation. 6 states have only 1 woman on their Supreme Court, 1 state has all males. Laura Strimple, spokeswoman for Governor Jim Pillen, said Pillen has not yet had the opportunity to appoint someone to the state's Supreme Court. She added, should that happen, the governor would appoint the most qualified candidate advanced to him by the Judicial Nominating Committee, without regard to race, gender, or religious affiliation. Powers said leadership pipelines and law school recruitment methods help determine what a state Supreme Court looks like. Supreme Court duties. Nebraska's High Court consists of a Chief Justice and 6 Associate Justices who hear appeals and provide administrative leadership for the state judicial system. The High Court has authority to be the original court in which a case is heard under certain circumstances, and hears all appellate cases regarding the death penalty, life imprisonment, or constitutional questions. The justices regulate the practice of law in Nebraska, handle admission of lawyers to the State Bar Association and attorney discipline, and also appoint lawyers to committees on discipline and professional responsibility. Source: Nebraska Judicial Branch. Nebraska State Court Administrator Corey Steele said he's watched the state undertake efforts to increase judicial diversity. He cited, for example, a program that goes further upstream to high school students. The Supreme Court and Court of Appeals meet periodically at high schools to hear oral arguments and to hopefully spark an interest in the legal profession. He said the courts have met in diverse schools across Nebraska, including Schuyler and Omaha. The State Bar Association, through its diversity section, has offered various programs to explain the judicial nominating process and to encourage diverse applicants to apply, said Executive Director Liz Neely. Although not specific to judgeships, Neely noted the work of the nonprofit Nebraska Legal Diversity Council, which promotes inclusion in the state's legal profession. Formed in 2021, the council was founded in part by the State Bar Association. Neely credited the University of Nebraska College of Law and Creighton University School of Law for their efforts to attract more underrepresented populations to law school. When it comes to the state Supreme Courts, she said, change can be slow in part because vacancies do not happen often. Nebraska, she said, has not had an opening since Justice Papik was appointed in 2018. Of 146 judges overall in the state currently, 10 identify as a person of color, Steele said, 5 black judges, 3 Hispanics, 1 Native American and 1 Asian American. That includes, in addition to the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, District, County, Juvenile and Workers' Compensation Courts. Noted also by the Brennan researchers is that Nebraska is one of 16 states and the city of Washington, D.C., where the Hispanic population exceeds 10% yet has no Latino Supreme Court justices. Nebraska was 12% Latino in the 2020 census. Brennan researchers say many factors drive the lack of diversity, including inequitable access to leadership positions across the legal profession and a history of racial and gender discrimination. Powers points out that a judge's background offers no guarantee of how he or she will make judicial decisions. However, she and co-author Alicia Bannon, director of the Center's Judiciary Program, say the public typically is better served by a judiciary that is reflective overall of the diversity of the population. Among other things, research has shown that judicial diversity leads to increased political engagement among young people, richer jurisprudence, more nuanced deliberations, and more robust public confidence in the court system, said the report. Among other national findings, 18 states have 0 Supreme Court justices who publicly identify as a person of color, including in Nebraska and 11 other states where people of color make up at least 20% of the population. Nebraska's population, according to the 2020 census, was 24% people of color. Just 20% of state Supreme Court seats are held by people of color, though people of color make up more than 40% of the U.S. population. Men hold 58% of high court seats. There are no Native American justices in 4 of the 5 states with the largest populations of Native Americans per capita. The 4 are Alaska, Montana, New Mexico, and South Dakota. 2 of the 5 states with the largest Asian American populations per capita do not have any Asian American justices. The 2 are New Jersey and New York. The report calls the underrepresentation of women striking because as early as 1985, women made up 40% of law students and have outnumbered men in law schools since 2016. Of 32 new justices appointed or elected since May 2022, 15 are women, 17 are men and 25 are white. Of the 32, 8 have experience as prosecutors and 6 are former public defenders. That reflects a minor increase in professional diversity across state Supreme Courts, the report said, but former prosecutors remain heavily overrepresented, with 38% of sitting justices being former prosecutors and 9% being former public defenders.